one place in northern England. I'll never forget it. I was there to debunk a story, but when I heard those knocks coming from inside the walls with no possible explanation, I felt a chill I still can't shake.
That's what makes poltergeists so intriguing, isn't it? Unlike your traditional haunting where you might see a spectral figure floating down a hallway, poltergeists are all about physical action. Things moving, noises, tangible effects that are harder to dismiss as just imagination.
Exactly. And today, we'll be exploring some of the most documented cases in history, from the Bell Witch to the Enfield Poltergeist. But before we get into all that,
We'd love to hear from you. If you're enjoying Mysteries Beyond Reason, please take a moment to leave us a review or subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing these fascinating stories to light.
And now, let's knock on the door of the unknown and see what knocks back.
Ooh, I see what you did there, Marcus.
I thought you might appreciate that one.
Let's start with the basics. The word poltergeist comes from German, poltern meaning to make noise or rumble, and geist meaning spirit. Literally, a noisy spirit or a rumbling ghost.
And that's their calling card, isn't it? Noise. Unlike your quiet, mournful apparition drifting through castle corridors, poltergeists announce themselves. They want to be heard, banging on walls, rapping on tables, making their presence unmistakable.
Exactly. And what truly distinguishes poltergeists from other paranormal phenomena is their physical activity. They don't just make noise, they move things. Objects flying across rooms, furniture sliding, doors slamming. It's like they're desperately trying to interact with our physical world.
And there's another crucial distinction. Poltergeists tend to be temporary visitors. While a traditional haunting might persist for centuries, poltergeist activity typically lasts from a few weeks to a couple of years at most. They burst onto the scene dramatically and then vanish.
That's right. And perhaps most interestingly, modern research suggests they often center around a specific person, what parapsychologists call the agent or focus, typically a teenager or young adult experiencing emotional turmoil.
Which brings us to the big question. What exactly are we dealing with here? Throughout history, there have been several competing theories. Jane, would you like to start with the traditional view?
The oldest explanation is, of course, that poltergeists are exactly what their name suggests, mischievous or malevolent spirits, entities from beyond trying to communicate, seeking attention, or simply enjoying causing chaos among the living.
A view that's dominated for centuries and still resonates with many people today. But in the 20th century, parapsychology offered a different perspective, didn't it?
Yes. In the 1960s, researcher William G. Roll developed what's now the dominant theory in scientific parapsychology, psychokinesis recurrent spontaneous, or PK-RSPK. The idea that poltergeist activity isn't caused by external spirits at all, but by the unconscious psychic energy of the agent themselves.
Essentially suggesting that a person under extreme psychological stress might unknowingly release bursts of psychic energy that can affect the physical environment, moving objects, creating sounds, disrupting electrical systems.
Exactly. The person at the center of the activity, often an adolescent dealing with puberty, family conflict, or trauma, has no idea they're causing these phenomena. It's like their repressed emotions are finding a physical outlet.
Which leads us to more conventional psychological explanations. Some psychiatrists suggest we might be looking at dissociative disorders, individuals in altered states of consciousness who might be causing the disturbances themselves without any memory of doing so.
Or even mass hysteria, where a group under stress begins to experience collective delusions or unconsciously participates in creating the phenomena they believe is happening.
And then, of course, there's the purely skeptical viewpoint that all poltergeist cases can be explained by either natural causes or deliberate hoaxes.
Right, everything from infrasound causing feelings of unease and making objects vibrate, to old houses settling, to underground water sources, to faulty wiring creating electromagnetic fields that affect perception.
Not to mention outright fraud. People seeking attention, financial gain, or just enjoying the chaos they create. We've certainly seen cases where that turned out to be the explanation.
No, I'd argue, Marcus, that even the most skeptical investigator has to admit there are cases that resist easy explanation, where multiple credible witnesses observed phenomena under conditions that make fraud or misperception difficult to accept as the only answer.
Fair point. And that's what makes these cases so fascinating. They challenge our understanding of both physics and psychology. Speaking of challenging cases, shall we dive into some of the most famous poltergeist incidents in history?
Let's do it. And I think we should start with one of the oldest, well-documented cases in America. The Bell Witch.
Ah, the Bell Witch. Tennessee, 1817 to 1821. The Bell family was terrorized for 4 years by an entity that became known as Kate. It began with strange noises in the walls and evolved into physical attacks. Blankets pulled off beds, hair pulled, slaps delivered to family members.
What makes this case so compelling is that it wasn't just the family reporting these events. Neighbors, community leaders, and even future U.S. President Andrew Jackson allegedly witnessed the phenomena.
That's right. Jackson supposedly visited the Bell farm and experienced the activity firsthand. According to the story, he declared, "I'd rather face the entire British Army than deal with the Bell Witch."
Though we should note that historical documentation of Jackson's visit is disputed by some scholars. What's not disputed is that the entity seemed particularly focused on tormenting John Bell Sr. and his daughter Betsy.
Indeed. And in a particularly dark turn, John Bell eventually fell ill and died after allegedly being poisoned by the entity. A vial of unidentified liquid was found near his bed, and when fed to the family cat, the animal died instantly.
The Bell Witch case is fascinating from a cultural perspective too. It occurred on the American frontier during a time of great change and uncertainty. Some anthropologists suggest it might reflect the social tensions of the era, particularly around gender roles and family structure.
An interesting point. And if we look at it through the PK-RSPK lens, we might consider Betsy Bell, a young girl in a restrictive society, as the possible unconscious agent.
Exactly. Now let's jump forward to a case that's often cited as one of the most scientifically credible, the Rosenheim Poltergeist in Germany, 1967 to 1968.
This one is particularly interesting because it primarily involved electrical phenomena, which could be measured and documented by engineers and scientists.
Yes, in the law office of Sigmund Adam in Rosenheim, some very strange things were happening. Light fixtures swinging violently, bulbs exploding, phones dialing themselves, electrical meters going haywire. The power company was baffled.
What makes this case stand out is the caliber of the investigators. Renowned physicist Hans Bender from the Freiburg Institute brought in a team that included engineers and other scientists. They set up cameras and recording equipment to document the phenomena.
And what they discovered was fascinating. The disturbances only occurred when a specific employee was present, 19-year-old Anna Marie Schaberl. When she was absent, everything was normal.
The investigators concluded that Anne-Marie who was experiencing significant workplace stress and conflict with her employer, was unconsciously causing the phenomena through some form of psychokinesis. When she eventually left her job, the disturbances stopped completely.
The Rosenheim case is particularly compelling because the electrical disturbances were documented by objective measuring equipment, not just human observation. Engineers stated that the patterns of electrical activity would have been extremely difficult to fake with the technology of the time.
Now let's move to perhaps the most famous and controversial poltergeist case of the 20th century, the Enfield Poltergeist.
Enfield, North London, 1977 to 1979. This case had everything. Furniture moving on its own, objects flying through the air, knocking sounds, and most dramatically, a gruff male voice that seemed to speak through 11-year-old Janet Hodgson.
The Hodgson family, single mother Peggy and her 4 children, were at the center of an absolute media storm. Journalists, investigators, and the curious flocked to their modest council house as reports of the phenomena spread.
What makes Enfield so fascinating is the extensive documentation. Investigators Maurice Gross and Guylaine Playfair spent months at the house, capturing audio recordings, photographs, and witness testimonies,
including that chilling voice, supposedly belonging to Bill Wilkins, a previous occupant of the house who had died there. The voice, speaking through Janet, knew details about Wilkins that the family couldn't have known.
Though we should note that Janet was caught faking phenomena at least twice during the investigation. She was photographed bending spoons and throwing objects when she thought no one was watching.
Which raises the central question of Enfield. Was it a genuine paranormal case with occasional fakery mixed in? Or was the entire thing an elaborate hoax perpetrated by children seeking attention?
Investigators believed the former, that while the children sometimes helped things along when nothing was happening, and visitors were expecting phenomena, much of what occurred was genuine and beyond their ability to fake.
Skeptics point to the inconsistencies, the proven instances of fraud, and the fact that much of the activity centered around Janet, a troubled preteen possibly seeking attention or expressing unconscious rebellion against her situation.
Which, interestingly, could support either the fraud hypothesis or the PK-RSPK theory, that Janet's psychological state was manifesting physically, just not through supernatural means.
Enfield remains divisive to this day. It inspired The Conjuring 2 and numerous documentaries, keeping the debate alive decades later.
I'd like to briefly mention 2 other fascinating cases. Eleonora Zugun, the Romanian girl, who in the 1920s developed spontaneous bite marks and scratches on her skin under observation, and the faces of Belmez in Spain, where human-like faces appeared in the concrete floor of a home starting in 1971 and allegedly continuing for decades.
Both cases represent different manifestations of what might be the same underlying phenomenon, whether that's paranormal activity, psychokinesis, or elaborate hoaxes that have never been definitively exposed.
What fascinates me about these cases is how they reflect cultural expectations. In deeply Catholic Spain, the faces resembled suffering souls. In post-war Germany, the manifestations were technological. In traditional Romania, they took the form of demonic attacks on the body.
An excellent point. We interpret the unexplained through our cultural lenses. So where does that leave us today? How should we understand these phenomena in the 21st century?
I think the PK-RSPK theory remains the most compelling scientific framework. That under extreme psychological pressure, the human mind might be capable of affecting the physical world in ways we don't yet understand.
Which, if true, has profound implications for our understanding of consciousness and its relationship to physical reality. If the mind can directly influence matter under certain conditions, we may need to reconsider some fundamental assumptions about physics and psychology.
Exactly. And even if we eventually discover that all poltergeist cases have conventional explanations, whether psychological, environmental, or fraudulent, they still tell us something valuable about human perception, belief, and our relationship with the unknown.
They certainly do. And they remind us that despite all our technological advances and scientific knowledge, there are still mysteries that elude easy explanation. Phenomena that force us to keep questioning, investigating, and wondering.
Which is exactly what we love doing on this show. We'd love to hear from our listeners about this topic. Have you ever experienced anything that could be described as poltergeist activity? Or do you have theories about these cases we've discussed?
You can share your thoughts and experiences on our social media or through our website. And speaking of sharing, next week we'll be exploring another fascinating mystery: spontaneous human combustion.
That's going to be a hot topic.
I knew